The air tasted of dust and cordite. Lieutenant Mason Hayes of SEAL Team Bravo 6 pressed his back against the weathered boulder, counting his remaining ammunition with mechanical precision. 18 rounds. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Contact East Ridge. Petty Officer Rivera called out, his voice tight with controlled tension as he returned fire at the muzzle flashes erupting from the ridgeline above. The Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan stretched around them like a fortress of stone and shadow. What should have been a straightforward extraction had become a tactical nightmare when their support helicopter took RPG fire 3 kilometers from the landing zone. Now 4 of America's most elite warriors found themselves pinned down in a depression that offered minimal cover from the elevated positions surrounding them. The bitter cold penetrated their tactical gear, numbing fingers that needed to remain steady on triggers. Command, this is Bravo 6. We are taking heavy fire from multiple directions. Request immediate air support. Hayes spoke with practiced calm into his radio, the kind of composure that had kept men alive through 12 deployments. The silence that answered was deafening. Comms are being actively jammed, Chief Petty Officer Sullivan reported, his face ghostly in the dim light of his tactical display. Something's blocking all frequencies except short-range team tactical. Hayes nodded, swallowing hard against the metallic taste of fear that threatened to overwhelm his training. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. He counted at least 16 confirmed enemy positions, with more muzzle flashes appearing every few minutes. Sir, we're almost black on ammo, Petty Officer Sarah Reynolds, their designated marksman, reported. Her face remained pressed against her rifle scope as she scanned for targets. Movement on the eastern slope. They're flanking us. Hayes made a rapid assessment. His team was outnumbered, outgunned, and running dangerously low on ammunition. No quick reaction force within range. Their exfiltration route compromised. Hostile forces converging from multiple directions. Options, Hayes asked, his voice revealing nothing of the calculations running through his mind. Die standing or die running, Reynolds replied, her steady hands belying the gravity of her words. The tactical situation was clear. The physics of survival were becoming impossible. In 16 years of special operations, Hayes had been in tight spots before, but this felt different, final. Sir, Sullivan's voice cut through the darkness. Hostile force is well equipped. Military-grade thermal imaging, precision fire-coordinated movements. This isn't typical insurgent activity. Hayes closed his eyes for a moment, running through prayers he'd learned as a child in Montana. When he opened them, the darkness seemed absolute. That's when the voice came. Low, steady, completely calm. Despite the chaos around them, a female voice cutting through radio static like a blade through silk. Bravo 6, this is Sentinel. I have your position. Hold fast. The 4 SEALs froze, weapons still trained outward, but hope flickering for the first time in hours. Sullivan's eyes widened, a look of disbelief crossing his face. Sir, he whispered, voice trembling slightly. That call sign, it's not in our mission briefing. The voice continued with surgical precision. Bravo 6, you have hostiles at bearing 045, range 410 meters. Elevated position behind the split boulder. Secondary group at bearing 315 using the dead tree for cover. Hayes felt his tactical awareness sharpen. Whoever this was could see things his team couldn't even with night vision. Copy, Sentinel, he responded carefully. What's your position? Northeast ridge, approximately 850 meters from your location. I have thermal imaging and clear sight lines to your perimeter. Hayes did the math in his head. 850 meters. That was beyond the effective range of most sniper systems, especially in these weather conditions. The fog alone should have made precision shooting nearly impossible. Reynolds pressed her radio. Sentinel, how do we know you're friendly? A pause then, because if I weren't, you'd already be dead. The blunt honesty was strangely reassuring. Bravo 6, the voice continued. I need you to move in stages. Reynolds, you're going to bound northeast 20 meters to the cluster of rocks, shaped like a horseshoe. Hayes, you will provide covering fire on my mark. Hayes hesitated. Taking tactical guidance from an unknown operator violated every protocol he'd been taught. But protocols hadn't kept them alive so far. Sullivan, what's your gut? He whispered. Sullivan was studying the terrain through his scope. Sir, those positions, she called out. I can see the muzzle flashes now. She's right on target. The radio crackled again. Movement on the western slope. They're attempting to flank your position. You have approximately 4 minutes before they achieve crossfire. 4 minutes. Hayes made his decision. Sentinel, we're moving on your command. Stand by. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Hayes could hear his own heartbeat, the shallow breathing of his team, the distant sound of boots on rocky ground as enemy fighters maneuvered in the darkness. Then the first shot rang out. A sharp crack echoed across the valley, followed immediately by shouting from the western slope. One of the flanking team's muzzle flashes went dark. Reynolds, move now, the voice commanded. Reynolds sprinted across the open ground, diving behind the horseshoe rocks just as automatic fire erupted from the ridgeline. Hayes and Sullivan laid down suppressing fire. There were tracers cutting red lines through the fog. Excellent execution, came the calm voice. Next bound Sullivan to the fallen log 15 meters south of Reynolds' position. Another shot rang out, this one from a completely different angle. A second enemy position went silent. How the hell is she moving that fast? Rivera muttered. But Sullivan was already preparing to move. Hayes was beginning to understand the tactical genius at work. Their mysterious guardian wasn't just providing sniper support. She was orchestrating a complex ballet of movement and fire using terrain features invisible to his team and shooting from positions that should have been impossible to achieve. Sullivan, move. The sequence repeated. Sprint, cover, pause. Each bound brought them closer to better defensive positions while their guardian angel picked off enemy fighters with surgical precision. By the third movement, Hayes could see the pattern. She was creating corridors of safety, eliminating specific threats that would have cut down his team during movement. Every shot was calculated not just for immediate effect, but for its impact on enemy morale and positioning. Sir, Reynolds' voice carried awe. Whoever this is, she's operating at a level I've never seen. Hayes had to agree. In 16 years of special operations, he'd worked with some of the finest snipers in the world. This was different. This was art. Fort Benning, Georgia, 1982. The early morning fog hung low over the firing range, shrouding the targets in a ghostly haze. 23-year-old Jessica Westbrook pressed her cheek against the cold stock of her M24 rifle, controlling her breathing as she had been taught. 5 heartbeats, inhale halfway, hold. The world narrowed to the crosshairs in her scope. 800 meters, moderate crosswind from the west at approximately 8 miles per hour. Temperature 52 degrees. Humidity high. All factors calculated and compensated for without conscious thought. The target appeared, a silhouette briefly visible through a gap in the fog. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the silent range. Through her scope, she watched the target snap backward. Hit! The range officer's voice betrayed no emotion, but the slight widening of his eyes told her everything. Center mass adjusted, windage perfect. Jessica allowed herself a small smile as she chambered another round. She was the only woman on this range, one of only 3 females selected for the experimental sniper training program. Every day was a test not just of her skills, but of her right to be there at all. The firing line consisted of 20 of the Army's best marksmen, all men most with combat experience from conventional deployments. They had initially greeted her with skepticism or outright derision, but 6 weeks into training, the comments had largely stopped. Results were difficult to argue with, and Jessica's results were undeniable. Westbrook, the deep voice came from behind her position. She recognized it immediately. Colonel James Harrington, the program's commander and a Korean War veteran, with one of the most impressive sniper records in military history. At 55, his face was weathered by decades of sun and wind, his posture still ramrod straight. Sir, she rose to attention, rifle held precisely at port arms. Harrington gestured toward the 1,000-meter targets barely visible through the fog. Those conditions are almost impossible. Think you can make that shot? Around them, several instructors exchanged glances. The wind had picked up, the fog was thickening, and the distance exceeded what most considered reasonable for the standard M24. Yes, sir, Jessica answered without hesitation. Harrington nodded once. Prove it. She returned to her firing position, settling behind the rifle with the practiced ease of someone who had spent thousands of hours perfecting every minute movement. The M24 sniper weapon system was new to military inventory, replacing older platforms. The .308 Winchester cartridge was capable at this range, but would require perfect execution. Jessica slowed her breathing, feeling her heart rate decrease as she entered what the instructors called sniper's mind, a state of heightened awareness combined with profound calm. She made her calculations, adjusting for the increased distance and deteriorating conditions. The target appeared through the foam, a momentary glimpse of the silhouette. She fired. 5 seconds passed. Hit! The range officer's voice carried genuine surprise. Headshot! A murmur ran through the assembled instructors. Jessica chambered another round, her face betraying nothing. Inside, however, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She hadn't joined the army to make a point or break barriers. She joined because shooting had been in her blood since she was 8 years old, hunting with her father in the mountains of Colorado. The rifle was an extension of herself, the ballistics as natural as breathing. Colonel Harrington watched through high-powered binoculars, his expression unreadable. But when she finished her sequence with 5 consecutive hits at 1,000 meters in deteriorating weather, he approached her position again. Westbrook, he said quietly so others couldn't hear. Report to my office at 1800 hours. There's something we need to discuss. She nodded, maintaining perfect military bearing. Yes, sir. As Harrington walked away, Jessica caught the glances from the male snipers, some respectful, others resentful. One face in particular caught her attention. Captain Michael Collins, the course's top shooter, until Jessica had broken his range record the previous week. His cold blue eyes held something more dangerous than resentment. They held hatred. Precisely at 1800 hours, Jessica stood outside Colonel Harrington's office, uniform, perfectly pressed boots, shined to a mirror finish. When she knocked, his gruff enter came immediately. The office was Spartan. No personal photos, minimal decorations, just the necessary military awards and unit citations arranged with geometric precision. Harrington sat behind a metal desk reviewing a file that Jessica recognized as her personnel record. Westbrook sat. She did, maintaining perfect posture even in the uncomfortable metal chair. You understand this sniper program is experimental. Harrington began without preamble. Women aren't authorized for direct combat roles. Won't be for years, maybe decades. This whole initiative could be shut down with one phone call from the right congressman. Yes, sir. Harrington closed her file. Your scores are the highest we've seen since the program began, not just among women, among anyone. Thank you, sir. That wasn't a compliment, Westbrook. It was a fact. Harrington leaned forward. I've served this country for 40 years, seen combat in multiple conflicts. One thing I've learned is that talent is too rare to waste because of politics or prejudice. He reached into his desk and withdrew another file. This one with classified markings and a designation she didn't recognize. Have you ever heard of Project Watchers, Westbrook? No, sir. Good, because officially it doesn't exist. Harrington opened the file but angled it so she couldn't see its contents. After the disaster at Desert One in 1980, certain elements within Special Operations Command recognized a need for operators who could function completely outside the normal chain of command. Deniable assets who could deploy anywhere, eliminate high-value targets, and disappear before anyone knew they were there. Jessica felt her pulse quicken slightly, but kept her expression neutral. These operators would have no official status, no uniforms, no formal recognition. They would be ghosts, there and not there. Their missions would never appear in any record, their achievements never acknowledged. Harrington fixed her with a penetrating stare. Their very existence would be classified at the highest levels. Why are you telling me this, sir? Because we're selecting 5 shooters for the program, and despite the reservations of certain individuals who think a woman can't handle this kind of assignment, your name is on the short list. Jessica processed this information carefully. What would this entail, sir? 6 months of specialized training beyond anything you've experienced. Access to experimental weapon systems developed under the Strategic Defense Initiative. Deployment to areas where American forces officially have no presence. Harrington's voice dropped lower. And the understanding that if you're captured or killed, the United States government will disavow all knowledge of your existence. The weight of his words hung in the air between them. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was a complete departure from the military life she had imagined. No recognition, no formal career path, no official acknowledgement of service or sacrifice. Why me, sir? Harrington's weathered face softened slightly. Because you have something the others don't, Westbrook. When most shooters make a difficult shot, they're thinking about their technique, their adjustments, their equipment. When you shoot, he paused, searching for the right words. When you shoot, it's like watching someone breathe, natural, instinctive, as if the rifle and bullet are simply extensions of your will. He closed the file. I'm not offering this because you're a woman. I'm offering it despite that fact. This country needs the best regardless of gender. Right now, that's you. Jessica considered her options carefully. The conventional path would mean fighting institutional barriers for years, perhaps never achieving the combat role she had trained for. This alternative offered immediate deployment, but at the cost of official recognition. When do I start, sir? Harrington's expression didn't change, but something like approval flickered in his eyes. Tomorrow, 0500. Bring nothing but yourself. He stood extending his hand, a gesture of respect rarely offered to junior officers. Welcome to the Shadows, Lieutenant Westbrook. The training facility didn't appear on any official map. Located in a remote corner of Camp Peary, Virginia, the compound consisted of low, nondescript buildings surrounded by miles of pristine wilderness, perfect for weapons testing, where the noise wouldn't attract attention. 5 shooters had been selected for Project Watcher's inaugural class: Jessica Westbrook, Thomas Murray, Michael Collins, David Wilson, and Robert Green. All exceptional marksmen, all chosen for their unique capabilities. Murray was a former SEAL with exceptional fieldcraft skills. Collins brought years of experience from conventional Army units, though his selection surprised Jessica given their earlier conflicts. Wilson and Green were Army Rangers who had distinguished themselves during covert operations in Central America. Their first morning began in darkness, standing at attention on a rain-soaked gravel yard as instructors moved among them like shadows. "Forget everything you think you know about being a sniper," a voice announced from the darkness. A figure emerged, not dressed in a usual uniform, but in nondescript tactical gear, without insignia or rank. It was Frank Mitchell, a legendary figure in intelligence circles. At 68, his lean frame and sharp eyes belied his age. A former OSS operative during World War II and early CIA operative during the Cold War, Mitchell's reputation was the stuff of whispered legends. "From this moment forward, you don't exist. Your previous service records have been sealed. Your assignments here will never appear in any official document." He paced before them, his breath visible in the cold Virginia air. "The weapons you'll be using, the techniques you'll be taught, the operations you'll conduct. None of this exists either. You are becoming watchers." The training that followed was unlike anything Jessica had experienced. 16-hour days filled with marksmanship drills under impossible conditions, shooting from unstable platforms in simulated extreme weather after physical exhaustion while experiencing sensory overload. They practiced calculating shots that defied conventional ballistics using ammunition and weapon systems that weren't supposed to exist. The XM-25 prototype they trained on could deliver precision fire at ranges that conventional military doctrine considered impossible. Combined with advanced thermal imaging systems developed from Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative program, they learned to track and eliminate targets in complete darkness through solid barriers in weather conditions that would ground conventional forces. Through it all, Jessica excelled. Her natural talent combined with relentless discipline and analytical mind allowed her to master techniques that challenged even the veteran operators. Only Thomas Murray, a soft-spoken Mississippian with preternatural calm, kept pace with her scores. "You've got a gift, Westbrook," Murray told her one evening as they cleaned their weapons. At 35, he was the oldest of the recruits, with crow's feet around kind eyes that had seen too much combat. "Never seen anyone calculate windage adjustments that fast." "Practice," she replied, though they both knew it was more than that. Collins, however, made no attempt to hide his resentment. "They're lowering standards," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. "Political correctness will get people killed downrange." Frank Mitchell observed these dynamics with the shrewd assessment of a man who had evaluated operatives for decades. One evening, he took Jessica aside during a rare break in training. "You know why Collins hates you so much?" he asked without preamble. "Because I'm a woman in what he considers a man's world," Jessica replied, cleaning her rifle with methodical precision. Mitchell shook his head. "It's simpler and more complicated than that. You're better than him, and he knows it. For a man like Collins, whose entire identity is built around being the best, that's unforgivable. So what should I do about it? Nothing, just be aware. In our line of work, the greatest danger often comes from within. Mitchell's eyes, sharp with decades of covert experience, held a warning. Watch your back, especially when everything seems to be going perfectly. When the tension came to a head during their third month during a stress shooting competition. The scenario: calculate and execute a precision shot after a 2-mile run in full gear, with instructors creating maximum distractions. Flashing lights, sirens shouted questions designed to break concentration. When Jessica's turn came, Collins deliberately positioned himself within her peripheral vision. Just remember Westbrook, he said as she prepared to fire. When you miss it, won't just be your reputation. You'll be proving women don't belong here. She didn't acknowledge him. Instead, she centered herself, calculated her shot, and squeezed the trigger. Perfect hit. Center mass at 200 meters under extreme duress. Later that night, she found a note slipped under her barracks door. Some people earn their place, others get it handed to them. Remember the difference. It wasn't signed, but she recognized Collins's handwriting. She burned the note and never mentioned it to anyone. It was during this period that Jessica first met William Reed, the civilian technician responsible for maintaining their advanced optical systems. Unlike the military personnel who treated her with careful distance, Reed was refreshingly direct. Your scope's elevation adjustment is off by 4.3 MOA, he told her after observing one of her training sessions. Not enough to miss, but enough to make you work harder than necessary. Jessica raised an eyebrow. The armorer checked it yesterday. The armorer isn't the one who designed it. Reed grinned, pushing wire-rimmed glasses up his nose. At 30, his rumpled appearance and perpetual 5 o'clock shadow stood in stark contrast to the military precision around him. Mind if I take a look? She handed over her rifle, watching as his hands moved with surprising deftness across the expensive optics. There's a manufacturing inconsistency in this batch, he explained as he worked. Fine for standard operations, but for what you people do, he made a minute adjustment. Try it now. The next day, her already impressive scores improved by 15%. After that, Jessica made a point of seeking out Reed whenever equipment issues arose. Their professional relationship gradually shifted as they discovered shared interests: classical music, mountaineering, obscure historical weapons. He became the one person in the program she could speak to without calculating every word. Why Project Watchers? She asked him one evening as he calibrated a new thermal system. You could make triple this money in the private sector. Reed was silent for a moment, his hands never pausing in their work. My brother was Army Rangers, got ambushed in Panama because of bad intel. If he'd had the equipment you're using now. He shrugged. Sometimes the most important work doesn't come with recognition. By the time their training concluded 6 months later, the original 5 had been forged into something new. Operators who could disappear into any environment, eliminate targets and at ranges considered impossible by conventional military doctrine, and extract without leaving evidence of their presence. They received their first deployment orders on a rainy Tuesday. The target, a Hezbollah commander responsible for the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut. The location officially nowhere. The team would not exist. The mission would not exist. Success would never be acknowledged. Failure would be denied. As they prepared their gear, Colonel Harrington approached Jessica. Lieutenant Westbrook, he said quietly, command has designated you as primary shooter for this operation. She nodded, aware of Collins's glare from across the room. Understood, sir. This isn't a training exercise anymore. Harrington's voice carried the weight of someone who had sent too many young soldiers into harm's way. From here forward, everything changes. I'm ready, sir. Harrington studied her face for a moment. I know you are. That's what worries me. Beirut, Lebanon, 1983. The mission was straightforward on paper. Eliminate the Hezbollah commander responsible for the October bombing that had killed 241 American servicemen, the deadliest single-day death toll for the Marine Corps since Iwo Jima. The reality was far more complex. Beirut in 1983 was a city shattered by civil war, divided between warring factions, with U.S. forces caught in the middle of an increasingly hostile environment. Jessica and the Watchers team deployed from a submarine off the Lebanese coast, infiltrating the city under cover of darkness. Their target was believed to be operating from a fortified compound in the southern suburbs, a Hezbollah stronghold no American could openly enter. For 3 days, they conducted surveillance, establishing patterns, confirming the target's presence, and planning their exfiltration. Jessica would take the shot from a partially collapsed apartment building, 400 meters from the target location. Wind is variable, shifting between 5 and 12 knots, Murray reported as they established their final position. Temperature steady at 68 degrees. Humidity at 42%. Jessica settled behind her rifle, a modified M24 with experimental ammunition designed specifically for this operation. The specialized round would deliver maximum terminal effect while minimizing sound signature. Through her scope, she observed the compound's main courtyard, where intelligence suggested the target would conduct his morning prayers. The pre-dawn light cast everything in shades of gray and blue. "We have a CIA team operating 3 blocks east," Wilson reported through their secure communication system. "They're under surveillance and at risk of compromise." This wasn't part of their briefing. Jessica exchanged glances with Murray. Unexpected variables were the enemy of precision operations. "Our mission parameters don't include CIA extraction," Collins stated flatly from his security position near the doorway. "We're not leaving Americans to die," Murray countered, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him the team's moral center. Before the disagreement could escalate, movement in the courtyard caught Jessica's attention. "Target acquired," she reported instantly, shifting the team's focus. Through her scope, she could see the Hezbollah commander surrounded by bodyguards moving toward a small prayer area. The identification markers matched perfectly. This was their man, the architect of hundreds of American deaths. "Range 412 meters, wind now steady from the northeast at 7 knots. I have a clean shot profile. Execute when ready." Harrington's voice came through their secure uplink from a command post hundreds of miles away. Jessica entered the focused state that separated elite snipers from merely excellent ones. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate decreased, her awareness expanded to encompass every variable that would affect the bullet's path. This wasn't just about mathematical precision. It was about intuition, about feeling the shot before taking it. "Send it when ready," Murray whispered. Jessica exhaled, halfway held, and squeezed the trigger with smooth, even pressure. The rifle's report seemed unnaturally muted, the specialized suppressor doing its job. Through her scope, she watched as the 7.62mm round found its mark 1.4 seconds later. The target collapsed instantly among his stunned guards. "Target down," she reported calmly, already adjusting her aim to cover the team's extraction. "Confirmed kill." What happened next deviated from their carefully planned operation. As the compound erupted into chaos, Collins, who was manning the northern security position, suddenly reported secondary hostile force approaching from the north, heavily armed, moving with tactical discipline. Murray quickly assessed the situation through his binoculars. "They're heading directly toward the CIA position. Looks like they were tipped off." Jessica felt the mission parameters shifting beneath them. Their primary objective was complete, but now American operatives were in imminent danger. "We extract now," Collins insisted. "Mission accomplished." "Not without helping that CIA team," Murray countered. Jessica made a split-second decision that would alter the trajectory of the Watchers program. "Murray's right. We've got the skills and position to make a difference." She caught a glimpse of something in Collins' eyes, a flash of calculation that went beyond the mission parameters. He seemed to be measuring variables that had nothing to do with saving American lives. "Harrington, this is Westbrook. Request permission to provide overwatch for CIA team under threat." After a brief pause, "Permission granted, but minimal engagement and maintain deniability." For the next 17 minutes, Jessica systematically eliminated threats approaching the CIA position, creating a corridor for their extraction. Each shot was a masterpiece of precision, taking into account changing wind conditions, multiple firing positions, and the need to leave no evidence of American sniper support. The CIA team never knew who had saved them. They would report mysterious enemy casualties that allowed their escape, perhaps attributing it to rival factions in the complex Lebanese civil war. As the Watchers team prepared for their own extraction, Jessica noticed Collins studying her with an unreadable expression. "That was unnecessary risk," he said flatly. "It was the right call," she replied. Something shifted in his cold blue eyes. "You just set a precedent that could compromise everything Watchers was built for." "We're not heroes, Westbrook. We're ghosts." "We can be both," Murray interjected quietly. "Ghosts with a conscience." Frank Mitchell, who had deployed with them as an advisor for their first mission, observed the exchange with sharp interest. He pulled Jessica aside during their extraction. "You made a choice in there," he said, his voice low to avoid being overheard. "Not just a tactical one, a moral one." "Is that a problem?" Jessica asked, her gaze steady. "No, it's what separates the best operators from mere shooters." Mitchell's weathered face held decades of covert experience. "But remember what I told you about Collins. A man like that doesn't forget when you choose a different path than his." Collins said nothing more, but Jessica caught him making a brief notation in a small black notebook before stowing it in his tactical vest. It seemed insignificant then, just an operator recording mission details. She would remember that notebook years later when everything fell apart. The team extracted, successfully disappearing into the Mediterranean night as silently as they had arrived. The mission was a complete success by any metric. The Hezbollah commander was eliminated, the bombing avenged, and a CIA team saved without compromising American deniability. Yet as their transport aircraft carried them toward a classified debriefing location, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed within the team. The fault lines had become visible between those who saw their duty as purely to the mission and those who believed even ghosts had moral obligations. Collins sat apart from the others, his face illuminated occasionally by the aircraft's dim lighting. He appeared to be calculating something far beyond their current mission, measuring variables only he could see. Jessica didn't know it then, but she had just participated in the first successful operation of a program that would become legendary in classified circles. The Watchers would go on to shape global events without recognition or acknowledgement, invisible hands guiding the course of conflicts too sensitive for conventional forces. She also didn't know that among them sat a man who would one day betray everything they stood for and force her into a decades-long hunt that would ultimately bring her to a mountainside in Afghanistan, saving another team of Americans who found themselves outgunned and abandoned. Bosnia, 1995. Rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the mountain paths into treacherous ribbons of mud. Jessica Westbrook moved silently through the darkness, each step calculated to leave minimal trace of her passage. After 12 years of operations with the Watchers, her movements had acquired an almost supernatural efficiency, the culmination of thousands of hours operating in the world's most unforgiving environments. Behind her, Thomas Murray navigated the terrain with similar precision. At 47, his hair now streaked with gray, he remained the solid foundation of their team, the moral compass whose judgment had guided them through countless ethical labyrinths. "Target compound is 1 click north," Murray reported through their encrypted communications system, his voice barely above a whisper. Their objective was Dragomir Radic, a Serbian war criminal responsible for orchestrating ethnic cleansing operations throughout the region. Intelligence had tracked him to a remote compound in the mountains far from the UN peacekeeping forces that patrolled the more populated areas. Operation Silent Justice. Eliminate Radic and destroy evidence of his ongoing operations without leaving traces of American involvement. Another ghost mission in a war where America's official stance remained deliberately ambiguous. "Weather's deteriorating," Michael Collins observed from his position 20 meters to their east. Over the years, his resentment toward Jessica had calcified into something harder, more brittle. They maintained professional courtesy, but the fault lines within the team had only deepened with time. David Wilson and Robert Green secured the perimeter as the 5 operators established their observation post on a forested ridge overlooking the compound. After 12 years and 27 successful operations, they functioned with the seamless coordination that came from absolute trust and shared experience. Or so Jessica had believed. For 3 days, they conducted surveillance documenting the facility's security patterns, personnel movements, and confirming Radic's presence. The Serbian warlord maintained a disciplined security routine with former military personnel, providing protection that far exceeded typical paramilitary standards. "Primary target maintains consistent routine," Jessica reported during their demission briefing in the camouflaged hide site. At 36, she had matured into a veteran operator whose reputation within their classified world had grown with each impossible shot. He inspects the perimeter at 900 daily, then meets with his security team at 1100. Security consists of approximately 20 personnel with military training, Murray added, reviewing the thermal imaging data they had collected. Former Serbian Special Forces, well-equipped, disciplined. "Recommendation?" Collins asked, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the tactical display. Jessica studied the topographical overlay, calculating angles and approaches. Two-phase approach. Eliminate Radich during his 1100 meeting when all key lieutenants are present. Create maximum command disruption, then neutralize the security detail at key points during the resulting confusion. Timeline for demolition of the intelligence materials. Wilson asked, referring to the documents detailing Radich's connection to ongoing ethnic cleansing operations. 30 minutes from initial shot to extraction. Green responded, tracing the route on their digital map. That gives us enough time to place charges on the main storage building while maintaining our escape route to the north. Collins studied the tactical overlay with narrowed eyes. Approach vector brings us dangerously close to the village on the eastern slope. The village is abandoned according to intelligence, Murray noted, has been since the fighting in '93. Collins seemed unconvinced but didn't press the issue. The team continued refining their assault plan, assigning specific responsibilities and establishing contingencies. By nightfall, everything was in place for the operation to commence the following morning. Jessica took first watch, settling behind her observation scope as darkness enveloped the mountains. The Bosnia night was cool and clear, stars brilliant against the black sky. After 12 years, she had learned to find a certain peace in these moments of solitary vigilance. "Mind if I join you?" Murray's soft drawl came from behind as he approached her position. "Your watch isn't for another 3 hours," she replied, not taking her eye from the scope. "Can't sleep." He settled beside her, his weathered face illuminated faintly by starlight. "Beautiful country. Hard to believe so much blood has been spilled over it." Jessica adjusted her scope slightly, focusing on the main building of the compound where a light still burned. "People have been killing each other over this land since before America existed. We're just the latest in a very long line." Murray was silent for a moment. 12 years we've been doing this, Jess. No recognition, no record, just ghosts passing through history. Having regrets? No." His answer came without hesitation. "But sometimes I wonder what comes after. We can't do this forever." Jessica had wondered the same thing. At 36, she was still in her prime as an operator. But the years of continuous deployment had taken their toll physically and psychologically. The weight of lives taken, of decisions made in moments of extreme pressure. "I don't think there is an after for people like us, Tom," she said softly. "We made our choice when we joined Watchers. We stopped existing on paper that day." Murray nodded, understanding the truth in her words. "Collins has been acting strange this deployment. More secretive, making calls when he thinks no one's listening." "Collins has always been strange," Jessica replied, but a flicker of concern crossed her face. "You think there's something I should know? Just watch your back tomorrow. Something doesn't feel right." Before she could press him, further movement at the compound caught her attention. Activity at the east entrance, unscheduled vehicle arrival. Murray raised his own binoculars. Military transport, no markings. They watched as 4 armed men escorted a group of civilians from the vehicle into the compound. Women and children moving with the stunned compliance of those who had endured recent trauma. "Those aren't combatants," Jessica said, tension evident in her voice. "Civilians, possibly refugees." Murray's expression darkened. Intelligence said nothing about hostages. That village wasn't abandoned. Jessica's mind raced through the implications. "We need to alert the others. This changes everything." By dawn, the situation had become clearer and more complicated. The abandoned village had indeed been populated primarily by ethnic Bosnian families. Radich's men had conducted a raid overnight, taking approximately 20 civilians hostage. Their purpose remained unclear, but the tactical reality was undeniable. The Watcher's mission now involved potential civilian casualties. "We need to abort," Jessica argued during the tense pre-mission briefing. "Parameters have changed. We can't guarantee civilian safety during the assault." "Our orders are clear," Collins countered. "Eliminate Radich and destroy the intelligence." The civilians weren't part of the briefing because they're not our concern. "Not our concern," Murray's voice carried rare anger. "Those are children in there." "Collateral damage happens in war," Collins replied coldly. "Always has. We can't compromise a strategic objective for a few local civilians." "They're not collateral damage. They're innocent people," Jessica shot back. "We need to modify the approach. Give me time to get into position where I can eliminate Radich without endangering the hostages." "There isn't time," Collins insisted. "Intelligence shows the documents are being moved tomorrow. This is our only window." Wilson and Green exchanged uncomfortable glances, caught between the competing arguments. "We're not executioners," Murray said quietly. "We've never accepted civilian casualties as part of our operations. I won't start now." The team was fracturing along moral lines that had never before been tested so directly. Throughout their 12 years of operations, they had maintained an unspoken code. Their targets were legitimate threats who had chosen their path. Innocent lives were to be protected at all kind of costs. "I'm calling it in," Jessica decided, reaching for the encrypted satellite phone. "Command needs to know the situation has changed." Collins moved with startling speed, his hand closing around her wrist. "No, we proceed as planned." The tension in the hide site was palpable, years of submerged conflicts suddenly rising to the surface. "Take your hand off me," Jessica said, her voice deadly quiet. For a moment it seemed Collins might escalate the confrontation. Then with deliberate slowness, he released her wrist and stepped back. "Make the call," he said. "But remember, we all agreed to put the mission first when we joined Watchers. Everything else is secondary." Jessica contacted Colonel Harrington, now a general nearing retirement, and explained the situation. His response was measured but firm. The mission would proceed but with modified parameters to ensure civilian safety. "Your primary objective remains eliminating Rodich," Harrington instructed. "But civilian protection is now designated Alpha Priority. Take whatever time you need to ensure their safety." The team spent the next 6 hours developing a new approach, one that would require more risk to themselves but minimize danger to the hostages. Jessica would still take the shot to eliminate Rodich, but from a more challenging position that offered a cleaner backdrop away from the civilian holding area. Murray and Wilson would infiltrate the compound to secure the hostages, while Green placed demolition charges on the intelligence storage. Collins' role was to eliminate key security personnel from a secondary sniper position, providing cover for the extraction of both team and civilians. As dusk approached and they prepared for the night operation, Murray took Jessica aside. "I don't trust him," he said quietly, nodding towards a Collins who was checking his equipment with mechanical precision. "We've worked with him for 12 years, Jessica replied, though uncertainty tinged her voice. "Whatever his personal issues, he's never compromised a mission. There's a first time for everything." Murray checked his sidearm with practiced efficiency. "Just be ready for anything." The operation began at 2300 hours under a clouded sky that provided ideal cover for their approach. Jessica moved to her designated firing position, a precarious perch on a rocky outcropping that offered the necessary angle while keeping her fire away from the civilian holding area. "Ghost 1 in position," she reported through the secure comm. "I have visual on the target building. No sign of Radich yet." "Ghost 2 in position," Collins acknowledged from his secondary location. "Ghost 3 and 4 beginning infiltration," Murray reported as he and Wilson approached the compound's perimeter. "Ghost 5 moving to intelligence cache," Green confirmed. The plan was in motion, each operator executing their role with the precision born of a decade working as a seamless unit. Jessica settled behind her rifle, controlling her breathing as she scanned the compound through her scope. The night vision technology had improved dramatically since their early days, allowing her to see details that would have been impossible a decade earlier. At 2317, Radich appeared in her scope, moving through the main building with 2 security personnel. She tracked his movement, waiting for the perfect moment when he would be isolated from any civilians. "I have visual on primary target," she reported, awaiting optimal shot placement. "Ghost 3 and 4 have reached the perimeter fence." Murray's voice came through slightly strained from exertion. "Proceeding to the holding area." Radich moved to a window, pausing to light a cigarette. The perfect shot presented itself. Clean backdrop, no risk to others, target stationary. "Taking the shot," Jessica announced, finger tightening on the trigger. Then everything went wrong. An explosion rocked the northern section of the compound, nowhere near the planned demolition area. Alarms immediately blared across the facility. "What the hell was that?" Wilson's voice carried confusion and alarm. "Green, was that you?" "Negative." Green responded, tension evident. "I'm still moving to position. Someone else triggered that explosion." Jessica's mind raced. The shot window for Radich had vanished as the war criminal ducked away from the window, shouting orders to a security team. "All units hold position," she commanded. "Something's wrong. This isn't part of the plan." "Security forces mobilizing," Collins reported calmly. "They're moving toward the civilian holding area." Murray's voice came through urgent now. They're going to use the hostages as shields. We need to move immediately. Negative, Jessica countered. We need to understand what's happening before her words were cut short by the unmistakable crack of a high-powered rifle. Collins' weapon. Through her scope, she watched as one of Radich's lieutenants collapsed. Ghost 2, what are you doing? She demanded. You are not cleared to engage. Collins' voice was chillingly calm. Primary target moving to vehicle bay, likely attempting evacuation. All units maintain position until we assess, Jessica began. But more shots from Collins's position interrupted her order. The compound erupted into chaos as Redditch security forces returned fire in multiple directions. Ghost 3 and 4 compromised. Murray reported the sound of gunfire audible behind his voice, taking heavy fire near the civilian holding area. The operation was unraveling. Without clear understanding of what had triggered the initial explosion, they were reacting blindly, their carefully coordinated plan disintegrating into individual survival efforts. Jessica made a split-second decision. Ghost 5, abort demolition and provide support to 3 and 4. I'm repositioning to get a shot on the primary target. She moved quickly from her perch, navigating the treacherous terrain with practiced agility. Through her earpiece, she could hear the situation deteriorating rapidly. Multiple hostiles converging on the holding area. Wilson reported, his breathing labored. We can't reach the civilians. Ghost 2, we need covering fire on the south approach, Murray called. Silence from Collins's position. Ghost 2, acknowledged, Jessica demanded, as she established a new firing position with sight lines to the vehicle bay where Radich was likely heading. Nothing. Tom Richards not responding, she said, reverting to first names in the crisis. Something's wrong. We're pinned down, Murray replied. Can't move without covering fire. Green's still 2 minutes out. Jessica acquired Radich through her scope as he rushed toward an armored SUV surrounded by guards. She took the shot, dropping him with a clean hit to the center mass. But instead of creating the expected confusion, the security forces responded with alarming coordination, directing concentrated fire toward Murray and Wilson's position. Taking heavy fire, Wilson's voice was tight with pain. I'm hit. Left shoulder. Falling back to secondary position, Murray reported. Wilson's wounded but mobile. Jessica tried again to raise Collins. Ghost 2, what's your status? We need support. The continued silence was damning. She scanned the area where his position should be, finding nothing through her scope. Ghost 5, be advised. Green's voice carried unusual urgency. I've spotted Ghost 2 moving north away from the compound. He's not engaging hostiles. The implications were staggering. Collins had abandoned his position, leaving his teammates exposed during a critical operation. I'm moving to support 3 and 4, Jessica decided, already navigating toward their position. 5, can you reach them from your approach? Affirmative, 2 minutes out. What happened next would be seared into Jessica's memory forever. As she moved through the forested slope toward her teammate's position, a new sound cut through the chaos, the distinctive thump of a grenade launcher. RPG. Murray's warning came a split second before an explosion ripped through the trees directly where he and Wilson had been taking cover. Tom Baugh, Jessica abandoned protocol, sprinting toward the explosion site. David, report. Only static answered. She reached the site to find devastation, splintered trees, scorched earth, and Wilson's body thrown against a boulder, obviously dead from massive trauma. Murray was nowhere to be seen. Ghost 5, I've lost contact with 3 and 4. She reported, her professional calm masking the growing horror. Wilson is down. I can't locate Murray. Green's response was grim. Heavy forces moving in your direction. You need to fall back immediately. Not without Murray. Jessica searched desperately through the smoking ruins of the blast site. A weak voice called from behind a fallen tree. She found Murray half buried under debris, his lower body crushed, blood pooling beneath him. His eyes, always so steady, now glazed with the approaching shadow of death. Tom, hold on. She knelt beside him, already knowing the wound was fatal. We'll get you out. No time. His voice was fading. It was Collins. I saw him with the RPG. The world seemed to stop. What are you saying? He's working for someone else. Murray's breathing grew more labored. Not an accident. Planned it. Which way? The question contained all the shock and betrayal Jessica couldn't allow herself to express fully. With tremendous effort, Murray reached inside his tactical vest, withdrawing a small metallic object, a thumb drive. Found this in his gear yesterday. Didn't know what it meant until now. She took the drive, securing it in her own vest. We need to get you medical attention. Too late for me. Murray's eyes found hers remarkably clear despite his failing body. The civilians, they're just a diversion. Real target is us. Us, watchers. Get out now. His hand gripped her arm with surprising strength. Promise me, you'll expose him. I promise, she whispered, holding his hand as his grip weakened. Been an honor, Ghost One. A ghost of a smile touched his lips before his eyes fixed on something she couldn't see. Thomas Murray, the moral compass of the Watchers, was gone. Jessica allowed herself exactly 3 seconds of grief before tactical awareness reasserted itself. Green was right. Enemy forces were converging on her position. She needed to move. Ghost 5, both 3 and 4 are down, she reported, her voice mechanical. Collins is compromised. I repeat, Ghost 2 is compromised. He's working against us. What? Green's shock was evident even through the comm. Are you certain? Confirmed by Murray before he died. Collins used an RPG on their position. The reality was still difficult to process even as she spoke it. We need to abort and exfil immediately. Moving to your position, Green confirmed. Jessica took one last look at Murray's body, making a silent promise to return for him, then moved quickly through the forest toward their emergency extraction point. Her mind raced with implications. Collins's betrayal wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. It was planned, coordinated, the explosion that had disrupted their operation, the precise response from security forces, the targeted elimination of team members. She and Green linked up 10 minutes later, moving in tactical silence toward their extraction point 5 kilometers north. Both understood the situation had fundamentally changed. They weren't just evading enemy forces, but potentially their own teammate. What about the civilians? Green asked as they paused to check the route. We can't help them now, Jessica replied. The admission painful but necessary. Our priority is to get this intelligence out. She tapped the pocket containing Murray's thumb drive. And to survive, to report Collins's betrayal. They had covered 2 kilometers when Green suddenly stiffened, then collapsed. The sound of the shot reached Jessica a moment later, a sniper round from extreme distance. She dropped immediately, scanning for the source. Even as she checked Green's condition, she knew it was futile. The bullet had struck him directly through the throat, a perfect kill shot that had bypassed his body armor. Only one person knew their extraction route and possessed the skill to make that shot. Collins. Jessica rolled into dense cover mind, calculating options. Collins knew her patterns, her techniques, her thinking. They had trained together for 12 years. She needed to do something he wouldn't anticipate. Instead of continuing toward the extraction point, she doubled back toward the compound. It was the last direction Collins would expect her to take. The risk was enormous. Security forces were still sweeping the area, but the alternative was waiting for Collins to hunt her down at his leisure. The night stretched into an exhausting game of cat and mouse. Jessica used every fieldcraft skill she possessed, moving only when absolutely necessary, creating false trails, utilizing terrain to mask her heat signature from thermal optics. Dawn was approaching when she heard the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors, not from the north where their extraction should have come, but from the compound itself. Using her scope, she observed a non-military helicopter landing in the cleared area. A man in tactical gear boarding quickly Collins. The helicopter lifted off, banking northwest toward the Serbian border. Jessica memorized its markings, a private aviation company with no obvious military connections. Another piece of the puzzle. She waited until the helicopter disappeared from sight before continuing her movement north, eventually reaching the secondary extraction point 12 hours later than planned. The waiting operatives were visibly relieved. They had received no communication after everything went silent following the initial explosion. "Where's the rest of your team?" the extraction pilot asked as she boarded the unmarked helicopter. "There is no team anymore," she answered, her voice hollow with exhaustion and loss. The debriefing at a secure facility in Ramstein, Germany, was brutal. General Harrington, now silver-haired but still sharp-eyed, listened in stunned silence as Jessica recounted the operation's catastrophic failure and Collins's betrayal. Harrington struggled to find words. "In 40 years of special operations, I have never encountered betrayal at this level. Murray gave me this before he died." Jessica placed the thumb drive on the table between them. He found it in Collins's gear, said it would explain everything. The drive's contents were illuminating and devastating, financial transactions showing payments to Collins from an organization identified only as Patriot Shield, communications outlining his mission to infiltrate Watchers and eventually eliminate the team. Most damning of all, a complete list of Watchers' operations spanning 12 years, with details that could only have come from someone inside the unit. He's been compromised from the beginning, Harrington concluded, his face ashen, using his position to gather intelligence on our most sensitive operations. Who is Patriot Shield? Jessica asked, still struggling to process the magnitude of the betrayal. A private military contractor with connections to former intelligence officials. They've been on our radar for suspected illegal operations, but we've never had concrete evidence. Frank Mitchell, who had been summoned to the debriefing, given his history with the team, studied the files with growing concern. I've been tracking these people for years, he said, his weathered face grim. Former agency men who believe the government has gone soft. True believers who think they're the only ones who understand what America needs to remain secure. What would they want with our operations data? Jessica asked. Power, Mitchell replied simply. Information is currency in their world. Knowledge of classified operations gives them leverage over officials, allows them to blackmail or influence policy. And the list of operatives, he shook his head. That's their real prize. Names they can sell to America's enemies. Harrington turned to a file on his desk. According to this, he indicated one of the documents. The civilians at the compound were brought in specifically to create moral conflict within the team, to separate you tactically and make you vulnerable. The calculated coldness of it was breathtaking. Collins hadn't just betrayed his country, he had deliberately engineered a situation that exploited his teammates' humanity against them. What happens now? Jessica asked, feeling the weight of 3 deaths, friends, brothers in arms pressing down on her. Harrington's expression was grim. Officially nothing. Operation Silent Justice never happened. Watchers doesn't exist. There's no record of your team being in Bosnia. And unofficially, Collins knows too much has compromised too many operations. He needs to be found and eliminated before he can sell more intelligence. Harrington hesitated. But there's a complication. What kind of complication? Political. Patriot Shield has connections in Washington. Powerful people who would prefer the situation remain buried. Harrington's eyes met hers directly. The Watchers program is being officially terminated. All records expunged. All personnel reassigned or discharged. The implications struck Jessica like a physical blow. You're shutting us down after what Collins did. Not my decision. Harrington's frustration was evident. Orders from the highest levels. The political exposure is too great. So Collins gets away with it, with killing Murray and Wilson and Green, with betraying everything we stood for. I didn't say that. Harrington leaned forward. I said Watchers is being officially terminated. What happens unofficially is another matter. He slid a file across the table, not digital but old-fashioned paper that could leave no electronic trace. Your injuries from the operation require extensive recovery time. You'll be placed on medical leave, then honorably discharged. Your service record will show conventional deployments only, nothing about Watchers. Harrington tapped the file. Inside is everything we have on Collins and Patriot Shield. Safe house locations, contact protocols, financial resources that don't officially exist. Understanding dawned. You want me to hunt him down outside the system? I want justice for our people, Harrington corrected. How that happens is not my concern, nor will it ever appear in any report I file. Mitchell leaned forward, his eyes holding the intensity that had made him a legend in covert operations. You won't be alone. I still have contacts, resources that exist in shadows even the government doesn't know about. When you're ready, I'll be there. The choice before her was stark: accept the official narrative and walk away, or continue the fight without the support, protection, or recognition of the country she had served for so long. I'll need medical attention first, she said, acknowledging the wounds she had ignored during her desperate escape. A bullet grazed along her ribs, shrapnel wounds from the explosion, a dislocated shoulder from her fall during evasion. Already arranged a private facility in Maryland. After that, Harrington spread his hands. Lieutenant Westbrook will officially leave military service with a distinguished but unremarkable record. And unofficially, Ghost One will disappear. What emerges afterward is entirely up to you. Ramstein Military Hospital, Germany, 1995. Recovery was slower than Jessica had anticipated. The physical wounds healed, but the psychological trauma proved more persistent. Nightmares of Murray's final moments, the weight of survivor's guilt, the corrosive anger towards Collins's betrayal. She was completing her final physical therapy session when a familiar face appeared in the doorway. William Reed, the technical specialist who had maintained their equipment throughout Watcher's existence. Now in his early 40s, his formerly rumpled appearance had given way to the polished look of a civilian contractor. "They told me you were being discharged next week," he said by way of greeting. Jessica finished her exercise before acknowledging him. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Officially, I'm conducting an equipment inspection at the base." Reed closed the door behind him. "Unofficially, Harrington suggested I might find you here." She gestured to the chair beside her bed. "How much do you know, Kalyan?" "Everything. I designed the communication systems you used in Bosnia, listened to the whole operation go to hell in real time." The knowledge that someone else had witnessed those final moments, had heard Murray's last words, Collins's betrayal was oddly comforting. She wasn't the only one carrying the burden of truth. "I've been analyzing the data from the thumb drive," Reed continued. "Patriot Shield is bigger than we thought. They've been recruiting disaffected special operators for years, building a private military capability that rivals some national armies. Wall Street money partly, but there's an ideological component too. Former intelligence officials who believe they know better than elected government. They're selling services to the highest bidder corporations, foreign governments, anyone who can pay." Jessica absorbed this information, fitting it into the larger puzzle. And Collins, one of their star recruits. Apparently, his marksmanship made him valuable, but his position inside Watchers made him priceless. Reed hesitated. "There's more. The list of operations Collins compromised, it includes the names of dozens of covert operatives. If Patriot Shield sells that information, those people will be hunted down and killed." The magnitude of the threat crystallized. This wasn't just about personal vengeance for her fallen teammates. It was about protecting others who remained at risk. "Harrington gave me a file," she said after a long silence. "Information on Patriot Shield safe houses resources." "I know. I helped compile it." Reed met her gaze directly. "The question is, what are you going to do with it?" It was the question she had been wrestling with throughout her recovery. The military had been her life, her identity operating within a structure with clear chains of command and defined missions. What Harrington was suggesting was something entirely different, becoming a ghost, in truth, not just in name. "I'm going to find Collins," she said finally, "and I'm going to stop Patriot Shield from selling that intelligence." Reed nodded as if he had expected nothing less. "You'll need help. Technical support equipment, intelligence. Are you volunteering?" "I've spent 15 years developing technology for operators like you, making sure you had what you needed to survive impossible situations." He shrugged. "Seems a waste to let all that expertise go unused." "This won't be official. No backup, no recognition, no way back if things go wrong." "Sounds familiar." A hint of a smile touched Reed's face. Isn't that how Watchers always operated? The decision solidified between them without further words. A new mission, a new purpose, not sanctioned by any government agency, but no less vital for those whose lives hung in the balance. "I have a property in Montana," Reed said. "Remote secure. We can use it as a base of operations while you complete your recovery. We'll need resources, equipment, intelligence networks. Already working on it. There are others, people who know what happened, who want to help. Not officially, of course." For the first time since Bosnia, Jessica felt something like hope stirring beneath the grief and anger, not just the prospect of justice for her fallen brothers, but the possibility of preventing further betrayals, of protecting those who remained at risk. "When do we start?" she asked. "We already have." Reed produced a laptop, opening it to display a map with a blinking indicator. "Collins has surfaced, Argentina, meeting with potential buyers for the intelligence." Jessica studied the information, the tactical part of her mind already calculating approaches, contingencies, extraction routes. The hunter was becoming the hunted. "One more thing," Reed said, reaching into his bag. He withdrew a small object and placed it on the bed beside her, a silver and black patch depicting a vigilant eye, the unofficial insignia of Watchers. There may not be records anymore, he said quietly, but some legacies deserve to continue. The years passed, transforming both the world and the woman who moved through its shadows. For 27 years, Jessica Westbrook and William Reed waged a silent war against Patriot Shield, operating without official sanction or recognition. They established Aegis Optics, a legitimate business manufacturing military-grade optical systems that served as both cover and funding source for their real mission. As the company grew, it provided them with global access and resources that even government agencies might envy. Jessica evolved from a military operator into something more complex, part hunter, part guardian. When they identified operatives targeted by Patriot Shield, she would appear like a phantom, eliminating threats, creating escape routes, ensuring safety without ever revealing her identity. The intelligence community began to whisper about the Sentinel, a ghost who watched over America's most vulnerable assets. Few connected this legend to the woman who occasionally consulted on security matters as Jessica Westbrook, CEO of Aegis Optics, a respected defense contractor. Frank Mitchell, now in his 90s but still possessed of a razor-sharp mind, became their conduit to the old intelligence networks, connecting them with retired operators who provided information, safe houses, and occasionally direct assistance. The old spy master had trained generations of covert operatives, but he often said Jessica was his finest student, the one who best understood that the shadows were a place where one could lose not just one's life, but one's soul. Collins proved elusive. They disrupted his operations, intercepted his intelligence drops, but the man himself remained a shadow, always one step ahead, protected by Patriot Shield's considerable resources and political connections. The world changed around them. The Cold War ended. New conflicts emerged. The Twin Towers fell. America found itself fighting new kinds of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Intelligence became the currency of the realm, and private military contractors grew in power and influence. And through it all, Jessica hunted. The woman who had once been defined by military protocol and chain of command became something else entirely, a force operating by her own moral compass, answerable only to her promise to a dying friend and her determination to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Her relationship with William evolved from professional partnership to something deeper, though neither ever fully acknowledged it. They lived in the spaces between normal existence, never fully committing to personal happiness, never entirely abandoning the possibility. The mission always came first, as it had since the day they joined Watchers. Then in 2022, everything changed. Jessica was monitoring communication channels from their operations center in Kabul when an emergency distress call caught her attention. SEAL Team Bravo 6 operating in the Korengal Valley had been ambushed and was requesting immediate extraction. Their communications were being jammed, their position compromised. Something about the tactical situation felt wrong, too precise, too coordinated, as if the enemy had known exactly where the team would be and when they would be most vulnerable. Then she saw the designation Bravo 6. It meant nothing to modern military protocol, but in the old Watchers classification system, it had been the code for operations targeting rogue operatives. It had been used exactly once when Harrington authorized her to hunt Collins after Bosnia. William, she called to her voice carrying an urgency he hadn't heard in years. Look at this call sign. Reed studied the screen, his eyes widening as the implication hit him. Bravo 6. That's not coincidence. No, Jessica agreed. This isn't a random military operation gone wrong. It's bait, specifically designed to draw us out. And the hand orchestrating it can only belong to one man. Jessica nodded grimly. Collins has resurfaced using American operators as pawns in his decades-long game with us. She made her decision in seconds. I need the thermal package and the M2010. Those SEALs are being sacrificed as part of Collins' own plan. I won't let them die even if it means walking into a trap. Jessica, wait, Reed caught her arm. If this is Collins, he's counting on exactly this response. He wants you to expose yourself. I know. Her eyes met his, decades of shared purpose flowing between them. But those men will die if I don't intervene. I can't let that happen, William. Not again. Not like Murray. Something in Reed's expression shifted a recognition of the weight she had carried for 27 years. Then we do this right. Full technical, package, emergency extraction protocols, and I monitor everything in real time. As she prepared her equipment, the highly customized M2010 rifle that had replaced her old M24, the advanced thermal imaging system, the secure communications package, Jessica felt a strange sense of culmination. For nearly 3 decades, she had been hunting Collins. Now finally, he was hunting her. She would save those seals, and then she would end this shadow war one way or another. The circle was closing. The hunter and the hunted were converging for a final confrontation decades in the making. The mountains of Afghanistan had witnessed centuries of conflict, but few as personal as the one Jessica Westbrook now waged. She moved with fluid precision through the rugged terrain, each step calculated, despite the burning pain in her shoulder. Her blood left a trail too faint for the untrained eye, but damning to anyone with tactical experience. The bullet had passed through cleanly missing vital structures, but taking with it enough blood to compromise her effectiveness. Combined with the grazing wound along her ribs, Jessica faced a rapidly deteriorating tactical situation. Collins had found her, wounded her, and was now hunting her with the same methodical patience she had once admired in him. She pressed her back against a weathered boulder, applying pressure to the wound while scanning the ridgeline through her scope. Somewhere out there, a man who knew all her techniques, all her patterns, was calculating the variables of her death. Her satellite phone lay shattered beside her, the bullet that had struck her shoulder continuing through to destroy her only secure connection to William. Tactical isolation, the first step in a professional elimination. Collins was following the playbook they had both helped write. Jessica performed a rapid assessment of her options. Direct confrontation in her condition would be suicidal. She needed to break contact, find shelter, address her wounds. Most importantly, she needed to warn SEAL Team Bravo 6 that they had been manipulated into a larger operation targeting American intelligence assets. The geography of the region flashed through her mind, a mental map built from years operating in these mountains. 2 kilometers east, a network of caves provided potential shelter. Not ideal, too obvious a choice, but her declining physical condition left few alternatives. Using the terrain for cover, she moved in short, controlled bursts, applying every evasion technique in her considerable arsenal. Each movement sent fresh waves of pain through her injured shoulder, blood seeping through the makeshift bandage she had applied. The moon disappeared behind clouds, providing additional concealment as she made her way toward the caves. By the time she reached the cave entrance, her tactical vest was soaked with blood, and the cold mountain air had begun to induce the first stages of hypothermia. Inside, she found a defensible position that offered both concealment from thermal imaging and clear sight lines to the entrance. Working quickly with her one good arm, she prepared a proper field dressing for her shoulder wound, injecting a battlefield analgesic from her medical kit. The pain receded to a manageable level, allowing her to think more clearly. Without the satellite phone, she had no direct communication with William. Her regular extraction was compromised. Collins would have teams searching the area systematically, and somewhere at Bagram Airfield, Bravo 6 remained unaware that they had been pawns in a deadly game between former Watchers operatives. She checked her watch. The SEAL team would complete their debriefing within the next 2 hours, then likely be transferred to a forward operating base for 48 hours before returning to their primary deployment. If Collins had infiltrated the command structure, as deeply as she suspected, Bravo 6 could be walking into another trap, one designed to eliminate witnesses to Patriot Shield's operations in Afghanistan. A sound outside the cave entrance froze her in mid-thought. Controlled breathing, the subtle shift of tactical gear, someone approaching with professional caution. Jessica raised her rifle, one-handed sighting on the entrance, finger resting lightly on the trigger. If Collins had found her so quickly, she would at least ensure he paid the ultimate price for his betrayal. A silhouette appeared smaller than Collins's frame, moving with a distinctly different tactical rhythm. The figure paused, then spoke in a hushed female voice. "I know you're in there. I'm not with them." Jessica remained silent, weapon trained on the entrance. "You're Sentinel, aren't you? The one who saved us in the valley?" Recognition dawned. Petty Officer Sarah Reynolds from Bravo 6, the team's sniper. "You're bleeding," Reynolds continued, gesturing toward the trail of blood drops leading into the cave. "I followed it from the ridge. You need medical attention." "You shouldn't be here." Jessica finally responded, not lowering her weapon. "How did you get away from the debriefing?" "It ended early, something about communication systems failure." Reynolds remained at the entrance, hands visible, showing she understood the protocols of approaching an unknown operator. Lieutenant Hayes sent me to do a final sweep of our extraction zones. Said he wanted to make sure we hadn't left anything behind that could identify us. Hayes sent you alone. Not officially. A hint of defiance colored Reynolds' voice. I convinced him I needed to retrieve something personal. In reality, I wanted to find you. Why ma'am? Because none of this makes sense. The ambush, the communications failure, the way command ignored our distress calls, and then you appearing exactly when needed with shooting skills I've never seen before. Reynolds took a careful step forward. Plus, I found this. She held up a spent cartridge case, distinctive non-standard issue, with markings that wouldn't be recognized by anyone without specialized knowledge. DARPA XM152 APX. Reynolds identified it correctly. Experimental ammunition developed for special operations snipers in the early 2000s, never officially deployed. Yet here it is at our extraction site. Jessica reassessed the SEAL team sniper. Reynolds was more observant and knowledgeable than expected. Dangerous qualities in the current situation. You need to return to your unit, petty officer, Jessica said firmly. This isn't your concern. With respect, ma'am, it became my concern when someone tried to kill my team. Reynolds' determination was evident. You're injured. Let me help. I have medical training. The tactical situation was deteriorating by the minute. Blood loss and the onset of shock would soon impair Jessica's judgment. And if Collins had people watching Bravo 6, Reynolds' absence would already be noted. Close the entrance behind you. Jessica decided, lowering her weapon slightly, and understand that what I'm about to tell you will put your life at risk. Reynolds secured the cave entrance using branches and foliage for concealment, then approached with a medic's assessing gaze. Gunshot wound through and through and a laceration on your side. You've lost a significant amount of blood. As Reynolds began treating her wounds with supplies from her own kit, Jessica made a calculated decision. After 27 years of operating in shadows, perhaps it was time to bring some truth into the light. My name is Jessica Westbrook, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, retired at least officially. Unofficially, I was Ghost One of a unit called Watchers that operated from 1982 to 1995. Reynolds' hands paused momentarily in their work, but her expression remained professionally neutral. The shooter who was hunting you, you know him. His name is Michael Collins, former Ghost 2. In 1995, during a mission in Bosnia, he betrayed our unit, killed 3 of our team, and sold classified intelligence to an organization called Patriot Shield. The memory still burned even after almost 3 decades. Patriot Shield specializes in private military operations outside any government oversight. They recruit former special operations personnel, particularly those with grievances against their former commands. And Bravo 6 got caught in the middle of this personal vendetta. Reynolds' voice carried controlled anger as she finished bandaging Jessica's shoulder. Not exactly. Your team was deliberately placed in that valley as bait. Jessica met Reynolds' eyes directly. Collins has been hunting me for years. I've been hunting him too while protecting the intelligence assets he's tried to expose. He knew I monitored emergency channels for American forces in distress. Your team's mission was designed to fail to create a situation I couldn't ignore. Understanding dawned in Reynolds' expression. Our communications were jammed before we even entered the valley. The intelligence was faulty from the beginning. Because someone in your command structure is working with Patriot Shield. Someone who could ensure your team was isolated, vulnerable, in exactly the right place to draw me out. Jessica winced as she shifted position. The question is who and how high the infiltration goes. Reynolds processed this information with remarkable composure. Lieutenant Hayes suspected something was wrong when our backup never arrived despite multiple distress calls. And Sullivan found something strange about our mission designation. What about it? Bravo 6, Sullivan said it's an unusual designation for our unit, almost like it was selected specifically for this mission. Jessica felt a chill that had nothing to do with blood loss. In the old Watchers classification system, Bravo 6 was the code designation for operations targeting rogue operators. It was used exactly once when I was authorized to hunt Collins after Bosnia. Jesus. Reynolds sat back on her heels. So our entire mission was a setup from the beginning. We were never meant to extract that asset. No, you were meant to die in that valley, or to survive only because I intervened. Either way, Collins would confirm I was still operational, still in the region. Reynolds' tactical mind worked through the implications. We need to warn the team. If what you're saying is true, we're all still in danger. Your team is probably being watched right now. Anyone who makes contact with them comes under scrutiny. Jessica gestured to her damaged satellite phone. And I've lost my secure communications. I have a unit radio limited range but enough to reach Bagram. Too risky. Standard military channels are certainly compromised. If Collins has the influence I suspect, Jessica forced herself to stand fighting through the pain and lightheadedness. We need to move. This position is compromised. You're in no condition to travel. I've operated in worse condition. It wasn't bravado, just the simple truth of 27 years living on the razor's edge. Collins will have search teams sweeping these mountains systematically. This cave is too obvious. Reynolds helped Jessica secure her equipment with the efficiency of a veteran operator. Where do we go? There's a secondary position 3 kilometers north. Natural overhang with better defensive characteristics and multiple escape routes. Jessica checked her weapon one-handed. My partner has a protocol for communication failure. If I don't check in within 12 hours, he'll implement contingency measures. Partner. William Reed, former technical specialist for Watchers, now runs our private security operation. A ghost of a smile touched Jessica's lips. We've been hunting Collins together for 27 years. As they prepared to move, Reynolds asked the question that had clearly been bothering her since the cave entrance. Why risk yourself for our team? You don't know us. We're not your responsibility. Jessica paused, the weight of nearly 3 decades pressing down on her shoulders. Because 27 years ago, I made a promise to a dying friend that I would expose Collins's betrayal and protect those at risk. Your team became part of that promise the moment Collins targeted you. The simple truth seemed to satisfy Reynolds. As they slipped out of the cave into the mountain darkness, a bond formed between them, not of friendship, but of shared purpose and understanding. The veteran ghost and the young operator moving through shadows cast by a conflict that had begun before Reynolds had even joined the military. William Reed paced the confines of their secure operations center, hidden within a nondescript building in Kabul. The satellite connection to Jessica had been severed abruptly, the transponder signal indicating catastrophic damage to the device. After 27 years of partnership, both professional and personal, he had developed an almost supernatural sense for when Jessica was in danger. The computer systems surrounding him monitored various intelligence feeds, communication channels, and surveillance networks, a sophisticated operation built over decades of careful work. Through these systems, he had tracked Collins's movements for years, always one step behind the man who had betrayed Watchers. Now, with Jessica's communication lost and Collins confirmed in the region, Reed activated contingency protocols they had established for worst-case scenarios. First, secure extraction teams were dispatched to 3 potential recovery points in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Second, emergency data packages were transmitted to secure servers maintained by former General Harrington. Insurance in case neither Reed nor Jessica survived the current operation. Finally, he initiated a deeper level of surveillance on Bravo 6, the SEAL team, that had unwittingly become central to this deadly game. The data flowing across his screens painted a disturbing picture. Lieutenant Hayes' team had completed their debriefing at Bagram, but anomalies were evident in the official records. Portions of their after-action report had been classified at levels inconsistent with standard protocol. Their next deployment had been accelerated, scheduling them for a new mission within 24 hours, far shorter than the normal recovery period. Most concerning was a communication intercepted between Bagram Command and an unmarked facility near the Pakistani border. A terse message referencing cleanup protocols for Bravo 6. Collins wasn't just using the SEAL team as bait for Jessica, he was planning to eliminate them as witnesses. Reed reached for a secure line to contact their emergency extraction team when the facility's perimeter alarm activated. Security cameras showed 3 vehicles approaching unmarked SUVs with the distinctive profile of private military contractors. Patriot Shield had found their Kabul operations center. With practiced efficiency, Reed initiated emergency shutdown protocols, transferring critical data to off-site servers and triggering deletion algorithms for sensitive information. He reached for the weapons locker beneath his desk, retrieving a Sig Sauer P226 and spare magazines. The first explosion rocked the building's eastern wall. Not a direct assault, but a breach designed to create confusion. Standard Patriot Shield tactics for a capture operation rather than assassination. They wanted him alive, which meant they believed he could lead them to Jessica or to the evidence she had accumulated against them over 2 decades. Reed moved toward the rear exit but halted when the security feed showed it was already covered by armed operators in tactical gear. The building had been surrounded with professional precision. His options were rapidly diminishing. The second explosion breached the main entrance. Smoke grenades followed, filling the operations center with obscuring clouds. Reed fired 3 precise shots toward the breach point, then moved laterally to change position. Another tactic from the Watcher's playbook. A voice called through the smoke. "William Reed, we're not here to kill you. Collins wants to talk." Reed didn't respond, instead moving silently toward the building's ventilation system, a potential escape route they had installed years earlier for exactly this scenario. "We have thermal imaging, Reed. We can see you moving toward the northwest corner. There's no way out." The professionalism of the assault team was impressive and concerning. These weren't standard mercenaries, but highly trained operators with advanced equipment. Patriot Shield had evolved considerably from the shadowy organization that had recruited Collins decades earlier. A figure appeared through the smoke, weapon raised. Reed fired twice, dropping the intruder with practiced precision, but 2 more immediately took his place, firing non-lethal rounds that struck Reed in the chest and leg. The impact knocked him backward in the specialized ammunition designed to incapacitate rather than kill. As consciousness began to fade, Reed activated one final protocol, a distress signal transmitted through a secondary system hidden within his watch. Not to an extraction team or military channel, but directly to the one person who might still be able to end this decades-long shadow war. His last thought before darkness claimed him was of Jessica and whether she would choose the mission or the man when the moment of truth arrived. Jessica and Reynolds reached the secondary position just as dawn painted the Hindu Kush in shades of gold and crimson. The natural rock formation provided both cover and concealment while offering clear sight lines to the surrounding terrain. "You're Lieutenant Hayes," Jessica said as they established their position. "What kind of officer is he?" "The best I've served under," Reynolds replied without hesitation. "Smart, adaptable, puts his team before himself." "Why?" "Because we're going to need his help to end this. Collins won't stop with just confirming my location. He'll want to eliminate everyone connected to this operation, including Bravo 6. Hayes would never believe this without evidence. It sounds like conspiracy theory fiction. Then we'll provide evidence." Jessica checked her watch, a specialized model with communication capabilities beyond standard military issue. "Reed should have implemented contingency protocols by now. We'll have extraction options within hours." The watch suddenly vibrated against her wrist, a distinctive pattern that sent ice through her veins. The emergency distress signal. "What is it?" Reynolds asked, recognizing the change in Jessica's expression. "Patriot Shield has Reed." The implications cascaded through her tactical assessment. "They found our Kabul operations center, which means they've likely accessed at least some of our intelligence network. Can they track us through it?" "No, we maintain air-gap systems specifically to prevent that." "But Reed," Jessica's voice hardened, "Collins will use him as leverage." As if summoned by her words, Jessica's watch emitted a different signal, an incoming communication on their emergency frequency. With practiced caution, she activated the receiver. "Ghost 1, Collins' voice, older but unmistakable, filled the small speaker. "It's been a long time." Jessica exchanged glances with Reynolds, gesturing for silence. "Not long enough, Richard. 27 years you have been hunting me. Impressive dedication, but ultimately futile. 3 dead teammates might disagree." Jessica's voice remained steady despite the rage simmering beneath. "Where's Reed?" "Right here, a bit worse for wear, but alive, for now." Collins's clinical detachment hadn't changed in 3 decades. "You've built quite an operation, you two. Private security contracts, intelligence gathering, even a charitable foundation for veterans. Almost like you're trying to atone for past failures. What do you want, Collins?" "The same thing I've wanted for 27 years. The evidence Murray gave you in Bosnia, the thumb drive with Patriot Shield's early operations data. That information was secured in multiple locations years ago. Killing Reed won't change that." "Perhaps not, but it would hurt you personally, wouldn't it?" Collins' voice carried the confidence of someone who believed he held all the advantages. 27 years is a long time to work alongside someone. Develops attachments, vulnerabilities. Jessica's expression remained impassive, but Reynolds could see the tension in her wounded shoulder as muscles tightened involuntarily. Here's my offer, Collins continued. Bring me the original thumb drive and all copies of the evidence you've accumulated against Patriot Shield. In exchange, Reed lives. Simple transaction. And I'm supposed to trust the man who murdered his own teammates. You have 12 hours. I'll send coordinates for the exchange when you confirm acceptance. Let me speak to Reed. A pause. Then William's voice came through, strained but clear. Jessica, don't do it. The evidence is more important than... His words cut off abruptly, replaced by Collins's cold tone. 12 hours, Ghost One, or you'll be burying another friend. The communication ended, leaving Jessica and Reynolds in tense silence. The tactical situation had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a hunt for Collins had transformed into a hostage negotiation with impossible parameters. You can't seriously be considering this, Reynolds said finally. From everything you've told me, that evidence is the only leverage against an organization that's compromised national security for decades. I'm considering all options. Jessica's voice betrayed nothing of the emotional turmoil beneath her professional exterior. First, we need to warn your team. Hayes needs to abort whatever mission they've been assigned. How we're isolated. Communications compromised. Not all communications. Jessica reached into her tactical vest, retrieving a specialized device that resembled a modified radio. This operates on frequencies Patriot Shield doesn't monitor because they're considered obsolete. Cold War technology. We can transmit a brief message to Bagram that should reach Hayes if he's still on base. As Jessica prepared the equipment, Reynolds studied her with newfound understanding. You and Reed, you're more than just colleagues, aren't you? Jessica's hands paused momentarily. 27 years is a long time to fight the same war. You find anchors where you can. The simple acknowledgement contained volumes about sacrifice, loyalty, and the human connections formed in the darkest circumstances. Reynolds nodded, recognizing the weight of the choice now facing the veteran operator. What will you do about Collins' demand? First things first, we warn Hayes. Then we prepare for the real battle. Jessica's expression hardened into the focused determination that had kept her alive through 27 years of shadow warfare. Collins thinks he's forcing me to choose between the mission and the man. He's about to learn I won't sacrifice either. Lieutenant Mason Hayes was preparing his team for their hastily assigned new mission when a communications officer approached with a puzzling message. Sir, we received this on an outdated emergency frequency. It was specifically addressed to you by call sign. Hayes examined the transcribed message, brow furrowing in confusion. Bravo 6 compromised. Stop mission parameters. Falsified. Stop environment structure infiltrated. Stop. Verify orders through alternate channels. Stop Sentinel. When did this come in? He asked sharply. Just now, sir. Frequency hasn't been used since the Soviet era. Most monitoring stations don't even check it anymore. Hayes' tactical mind processed the implications rapidly. The message could be disinformation, but the reference to Sentinel, the call sign used by their mysterious guardian angel in the Hindu Kush, suggested otherwise. Combined with the troubling inconsistencies he'd already noted in their new mission parameters, it painted a disturbing picture. Where's Reynolds? He asked Cooper, the team's medic. Still out doing that final sweep you authorized. Should have been back by now. Hayes made a rapid decision. Sullivan accessed the classified mission briefing through your secondary authentication. I want to verify every detail before we deploy. Sir, Sullivan looked confused. That would violate protocol. Do it anyway. Something's not right here. As Sullivan worked, Hayes examined the watcher patch he had found near their extraction point, the tangible evidence of their mysterious savior's existence. The warning message aligned with his own growing suspicions about their unusually rushed redeployment. Sir, Sullivan's voice carried barely controlled alarm. The mission parameters in the secondary system don't match our briefing. LZ coordinates are different. Intelligence assessments contradictory. It's like we're looking at two different operations, or one real mission and one false one. Someone's setting us up, Hayes concluded grimly. Cooper and Sullivan exchanged concerned glances. For what purpose? I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. Hayes made another rapid decision. Sullivan, use your back channel to contact Admiral Winters directly. He's outside the regional command structure and can verify whether these orders actually came through proper channels. That's a serious breach of protocol, sir. So is sending a SEAL team into an ambush based on falsified intelligence. Hayes's voice hardened. Do it now. As Sullivan established the secure connection, Hayes reviewed everything that had happened since their disastrous mission in the Hindu Kush. The mysterious sniper who had saved them, the communication failures, the accelerated redeployment without proper recovery time, the contradictory mission parameters. Most concerning was Reynolds' continued absence. His most experienced operator wouldn't simply disappear without good reason. Sullivan returned with a grim expression. Admiral Winters confirms our mission was not properly authorized through the chain of command. He's ordering an immediate stand-down and internal security review. That's what I thought. Hayes gathered his team. Gear up, full combat load. We're going to find Reynolds. Where, sir? Cooper asked. Hayes studied the transcribed message again, focusing on the call sign. We start at our last extraction point. If Sentinel contacted Reynolds, that's where they'd meet. As the team prepared to move, Hayes received an unexpected communication. A direct order from Bagram, command to deploy immediately for their assigned mission, countermanding Admiral Winters' stand-down order. The conflicting commands confirmed everything the mysterious message had implied. Someone within the command structure was compromised, attempting to force Bravo 6 into a mission designed to eliminate them. We're going dark, Hayes informed his team. No standard communications. We operate on alternate frequencies only. Trust no one outside this team until we understand what we're dealing with. The 3 remaining members of Bravo 6 slipped away from Bagram, using evasion techniques typically reserved for hostile territory, a tacit acknowledgement that they could no longer trust their own command structure. On a remote mountain peak overlooking the meeting coordinates Collins had specified, Jessica made final preparations for the most dangerous operation of her career. Her wounded shoulder had been properly treated by Reynolds. The pain managed through battlefield medicine techniques developed over years of operating without proper medical support. Hayes and his team had arrived at their position an hour earlier, guided by Reynolds through the treacherous mountain terrain. The lieutenant had absorbed the incredible briefing about Watchers Collins's betrayal and Patriot Shield's infiltration with the focused attention of an elite operator, asking precise questions about tactical implications while reserving judgment on the broader conspiracy. Frank Mitchell's voice crackled through the secure radio channel, startling everyone present. The 108-year-old former OSS operative and CIA legend had insisted on directing operations from a secure position several miles away, despite Jessica's protests about his age. Jessica, I've analyzed Collins's tactical approach. Mitchell's voice still remarkably sharp despite his advanced years. He's following a pattern we developed in '86, creating tiered security with overlapping fields of fire. Classic Watchers containment setup. Can you identify weaknesses? Jessica asked, deferring to her old mentor's expertise. West Approach has a blind spot. Their thermal imaging can't penetrate the rock formation at bearing 278. Also, they're expecting a conventional assault, not the kind of precision shot you're planning. Hayes studied the veteran intelligence operative's analysis with newfound respect. So this Collins character has read at the designated coordinates. He summarized studying the terrain through high-powered binoculars. He's expecting you to arrive alone with the evidence that could expose his organization. Meanwhile, he's almost certainly prepared an ambush to eliminate both you and the evidence permanently. That's the situation, Jessica confirmed, checking her modified M2010 rifle. The weapon had been customized over decades to her exact specifications, an extension of her own body rather than merely a tool. And your plan is to outshoot a man who has the same training, knows your techniques, and has a hostage's leverage. Not exactly. Jessica gestured toward the elaborate setup Reynolds was helping assemble. Collins knows me, or believes he does. He's expecting me to approach this as Ghost One would have 27 years ago, methodical, by the book, prioritizing the mission above all else. But you're not that person anymore. Reynolds observed, connecting components of what appeared to be a specialized communication system. No 27 years operating outside the system changes your perspective. Jessica adjusted her scope with practiced precision. Collins expects me to choose between saving Reed and preserving the evidence against Patriot Shield. He doesn't realize I've spent 27 years preparing for this exact scenario. And that's where we come in. Mitchell added, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who had orchestrated covert operations across 6 decades. Collins trained with Jessica, knows how she thinks, but he never trained with me. He doesn't know my methods, which gives us an edge. Hayes studied the veteran operator with growing respect. What do you need from us? Your team provides the elements Collins won't be expecting. He's focused on Jessica on ending their personal war. He won't have planned for SEAL Team Bravo 6 to be involved. The tactical plan they developed over the next hour was elegant in its simplicity. Jessica would approach the meeting point apparently alone, carrying a decoy version of the evidence Collins demanded. Meanwhile, Hayes' team would infiltrate from multiple angles using techniques specifically designed to counter Patriot Shield's advanced surveillance. Most crucial was the technological component Reynolds was assembling, a specialized jamming system that would temporarily disable the advanced communications Patriot Shield relied upon isolating Collins from his support teams at the critical moment. There's one variable we can't control, Hayes noted as they finalized preparations. Collins will have Reed under direct threat. One wrong move and your partner dies before we can intervene. That's why I'll be taking the shot, Jessica replied with quiet confidence. One shot, one kill from a position Collins won't expect at a range most snipers would consider impossible. What range are we talking about? Approximately 100 meters with variable wind conditions and declining light. Hayes' eyebrows rose. That's beyond the effective range of standard sniper systems. Yes. Jessica allowed herself a small smile. But I've been making impossible shots since before you joined the Navy, Lieutenant. It's not just the distance, Mitchell explained. It's the precision required. Jessica isn't aiming to kill Collins. That would be the predictable play. She's going to shoot the weapon out of his hand before he can harm Reed. Hayes struggled to find words. Is that even possible? For Ghost One, Mitchell's voice carried absolute certainty. It's what she does. As the designated meeting time approached, each operator moved into position with the disciplined precision that defined elite units. Hayes and Cooper established overwatch positions covering the main approaches. Sullivan deployed the jamming technology at the optimal location for maximum effect. Reynolds positioned herself as Jessica's spotter, using her considerable skills to calculate wind temperature and barometric conditions affecting the shot. Through her scope, Jessica observed Collins' arrival at the designated coordinates, a small plateau offering clear visibility in all directions. Tactical perfection for someone expecting a conventional approach. 3 Patriot Shield operators established security positions while Collins himself remained with Reed in the central clearing. Even from this extreme distance, Jessica could see that William had been mistreated, his face showing signs of interrogation, his stance indicating possible broken ribs. But he was alive and his eyes were clear. After 27 years together, she could read his body language like a book. He was preparing himself, staying mentally sharp despite his physical condition. Primary target confirmed. Reynolds reported through their secure communication. Collins has the hostage center position, standard execution stance, 3 tangos at perimeter positions, probable additional forces beyond visual range. Bravo 6 in position. Hayes' voice came through. Ready on your mark. Wind shifting, Mitchell observed from his command position. 7 knots at your 2 o'clock, Jessica. You'll need to adjust 2 moe. Already calculated, she replied, her mind processing the complex variables that would affect her bullet's path with the intuitive ease that had made her a legend. Initiating now, Jessica responded, her voice carrying the calm certainty that had defined her career as Ghost One. Through her earpiece, she could hear Sullivan begin the countdown to communications blackout. The jamming system would temporarily disable all standard tactical frequencies, cutting Collins off from any reinforcements positioned beyond the immediate area. Blackout in 3, 2, 1, execute. The moment the jamming system activated, Jessica took the shot that 27 years of patience, planning, and purpose had prepared her for. The M2010 rifle spoke once. Time seemed to stretch as the bullet traveled the extraordinary distance to 100 meters of open air, affected by crosswinds, temperature variations, and the curvature of the Earth itself. A shot that represented the absolute pinnacle of human capability in precision marksmanship. Through her scope, Jessica watched as Collins's right arm suddenly jerked backward, the pistol he had been holding against Reed's head flying from his grasp. Not a kill shot. Jessica had deliberately targeted the weapon rather than the man. Collins stumbled backward in shock and pain as Reed, despite his injuries, reacted with the trained reflexes of a veteran operative, driving an elbow into his captor's solar plexus. Shot confirmed. Target neutralized. Bravo 6 execute phase 2. Jessica reported already adjusting her aim toward the first of the perimeter guards who was reacting to the chaos. Perfect execution, Ghost 1. Mitchell's voice held unmistakable pride. Just like we trained for in '84. What followed was a masterclass in special operations efficiency. Hayes's team moved with coordinated precision, neutralizing the Patriot Shield operators before they could effectively respond to the sudden loss of both communications and leadership. Within 90 seconds, all hostile forces in the immediate area had been contained. Jessica maintained her overwatch position, scanning for additional threats, as Hayes secured Collins and Cooper provided emergency medical attention to Reed. The operation had succeeded beyond reasonable expectations. Collins captured alive. Reed rescued. All Bravo 6 operators unharmed. Only when Reynolds confirmed the perimeter was secure did Jessica finally lower her rifle, allowing herself to acknowledge the culmination of 27 years' work. Collins' capture would provide the final evidence needed to expose Patriot Shield's operations and the extent of their infiltration into military command structures. The long hunt was over. Dawn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson as the extraction helicopter settled onto a makeshift landing zone 2 kilometers from the operation site. Hayes supervised the loading of equipment and prisoners while his team maintained security. Collins sat in silent fury, his wounded arm professionally bandaged. For the first time, Jessica confronted him directly, studying the man who had once been her teammate and had become her nemesis. "Why, Richard?" she asked, her voice devoid of the anger that had driven her for decades. Now there was only a need to understand. We were on the same side. Collins met her gaze, his cold blue eyes unchanged after 27 years. "Were we?" "You saw what happened after Desert Storm. America turning its back on its own ideals, politicians sacrificing security for votes. We weren't protecting the country anymore. We were enabling its decline. So you betrayed everything we stood for, killed your own teammates. I chose a different path to the same goal," Collins replied with chilling conviction. Someone needed to take control back from the bureaucrats and politicians who were destroying America from within. Patriot Shield offered that opportunity, a chance to serve the real America, not the watered-down version politicians were creating. And Murray Wilson Green were their deaths necessary for your real America. For the first time, something like regret flickered across Collins's face. Casualties happen in war. You know that better than most. This wasn't war, it was betrayal. Jessica stepped closer. "You didn't just betray your country, Richard. You betrayed the people who trusted you with their lives." "Judge me if you want," Collins said, his voice hardening again. "But remember this. I did what I believed was necessary." "Can you say the same about every life you've taken in the name of orders?" The question hung in the air between them, but Jessica had long since made her peace with that moral calculus. "The difference is I never confused my personal beliefs with patriotism. That's what Patriot Shield sold you, the comforting lie that your resentment and ambition were actually noble principles." Mitchell approached his ancient frame, still carrying the dignity of a man who had served through America's most challenging covert conflicts. "I saw men like you in the OSS Collins, men who thought their judgment superseded the country they claimed to serve. They always ended up serving only themselves." Collins stared at the legendary operative with a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. "Frank Mitchell, I thought you'd be dead by now." "I made a promise to see this through," Mitchell replied simply. "Some oaths matter more than personal comfort." Reed, despite his injuries, maintained the quiet dignity that had characterized his partnership with Jessica through 27 years of shadow warfare. As they prepared for departure, Hayes approached Jessica, who stood slightly apart from the group, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "The evidence you've collected," he said without preamble, "it implicates people in current command positions." "At the highest levels," she confirmed. "Collins' infiltration went deeper than we initially believed. The corruption extends into multiple branches, multiple agencies." Hayes absorbed this with the stoic acceptance of a career officer who understood that institutions sometimes failed their ideals. "What happens now? The evidence goes to people we trust, former General Harrington and a select group within military intelligence who've remained clean. There will be investigations, resignations, possibly prosecutions." Jessica's expression remained impassive. The system will resist, but the evidence is irrefutable. And you, a ghost of a smile touched her lips. Ghost One disappeared a long time ago. Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Westbrook is just a private security contractor with no official connection to these events. Hayes studied the veteran operator thoughtfully. My report will need to explain how my team located and captured a rogue operative who's been compromising national security for decades. I'm sure you'll find an appropriate explanation that protects operational security. Jessica turned to face him directly. Your team performed exceptionally, Hayes. They deserve recognition even if it can't include the full truth. And the mysterious sentinel who saved us in the Hindu Kush? A fortuitous coincidence. Nothing more. Hayes nodded, understanding the unspoken agreement. Some truths remained in shadows, protected by those who operated there. If you ever need anything, I know where to find you. Jessica extended her hand in operator's acknowledgement of mutual respect. Take care of your team, Lieutenant. They're the ones who matter in the end. As the helicopter lifted off carrying Hayes' team and their high-value prisoner toward a reckoning long overdue, Jessica, Reed, and Mitchell remained behind watching until the aircraft disappeared beyond the mountain ridges. 27 years, Reed said quietly, his voice rough from his ordeal. Hard to believe it's finally over. This part is over, Jessica corrected, her hand finding his in a rare display of the connection they had forged through decades of shared purpose. There will always be other threats, other shadows that need light. Always the mission first, Ghost One. Despite his injuries, a hint of wry humor colored Reed's words. No, she replied, surprising him with her certainty. Not anymore. Some things matter more than the mission. The simple acknowledgement represented a profound evolution for the woman who had once defined herself entirely by duty and purpose. 27 years of operating in shadows had taught her that connections to people, to principles, to something beyond the mission were what ultimately kept the darkness at bay. Mitchell watched this exchange with the quiet satisfaction of a teacher who had witnessed his student's greatest lesson. You learned what I hoped you would, he said softly. The mission must never consume the humanity it's meant to protect. 6 months later, Washington, D.C. The hearing room was silent as Collins provided his testimony. Behind closed doors, secured at the highest levels, he detailed Patriot Shield's operations, its political connections, and the extent of its infiltration into governmental agencies. In exchange for his cooperation, he would avoid the death penalty, instead facing life imprisonment for charges including treason, murder, and conspiracy against the United States. The scandal would rock Washington for years to come, with resignations and prosecutions reaching into the highest echelons of political and military leadership. Outside the Capitol, Jessica and Reed watched as snow fell gently on the National Mall. The Cold War Memorial stood before them, its stark lines commemorating a conflict that had shaped both their lives in profound ways. Harrington called, Reed said quietly. The last of the compromised operatives has been secured. Everyone on Collins's list is safe now. Jessica nodded, the weight of a promise made 27 years ago finally lifting from her shoulders. Murray could rest in peace now. The betrayal had been exposed, the traitor brought to justice. I've been thinking about what comes next, she said after a moment. The Sentinel Foundation is doing good work, Reed observed. Veteran support rehabilitation programs, family assistance. A worthy legacy. More than that, Jessica turned to face him fully. There are still operators out there who need what we can provide. Training, support, a safety net outside the system. You're proposing we continue not hunting, teaching, protecting, passing on what we've learned to a new generation. She gestured toward the memorial. The threats change. The shadows remain. Reed studied her face, seeing in it the same determination that had sustained her through decades of invisible warfare, but now tempered with something new, a sense of purpose beyond mere vengeance or duty. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. The simple statement carried the weight of 27 years of shared struggle and sacrifice. As they walked away from the memorial, a black SUV pulled alongside them. The window lowered, revealing the aged but still commanding presence of former General Harrington. Colonel Westbrook, Mr. Reed, a word if you have time. Inside the vehicle, Harrington passed a classified folder to Jessica. The DoD is establishing a new special access program, completely outside standard channels, overseen directly by a select congressional committee with no political affiliations. Jessica opened the folder, scanning its contents with practiced efficiency. Project Sentinel. The next generation of what Watchers should have been, Harrington confirmed. With proper oversight, this time proper protections. Why tell us? Because they need instructors. People who understand the shadows because they've lived in them. People who know the cost of secrets and the value of integrity. Harrington's weathered face carried the weight of decades of difficult decisions. No pressure. Take time to consider it. As the SUV drove away, Jessica and Reed continued their walk through the snow-covered Capitol. The folder tucked securely under her arm represented something she had never expected to see again, an opportunity to serve openly, to transform their hard-won experience into protection for others. "What do you think?" Reed asked quietly. Before Jessica could answer, Mitchell approached, moving slowly but with purpose despite his age. He had insisted on attending the congressional hearings and a living witness to both the origins and conclusion of the Watcher saga. "I'd like to say something," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had guided generations of covert operatives. "I've spent my life training people to operate in shadows. I've seen what happens when good operators lose their moral compass. Collins wasn't the first, won't be the last." He looked directly at Jessica. "What these young operators need isn't just technical skill. They need someone who understands the weight of the decisions they'll face. Someone who's walked the edge and found a way back." Jessica watched a group of young military officers passing by, their faces bright with purpose and conviction, untested by the moral complexities that awaited them in the world's darker corners. "I think they'll need someone to show them how to navigate the shadows without losing themselves." The certainty in her voice was born of experience of failure and redemption of 27 years walking the finest of lines. "And I think that someone should understand what's at stake." As they reached the street corner, Jessica paused, looking back at the Cold War memorial gleaming in the winter light. Frank Mitchell watched it too, the old warrior finally seeing the culmination of decades of service most would never know about. The memorial's inscription, Reed noted following their gaze. "Not all victories are celebrated. Not all heroes are known. But they matter all the same," Jessica finished. Mitchell nodded, a lifetime of secret service in his eyes. "They always have." In the distance, a group of operators waited, men and women selected for a program that officially didn't exist, chosen to walk the paths Jessica had helped forge. The next generation of sentinels preparing to stand watch in a world where shadows grew ever deeper and the line between ally and enemy increasingly blurred. The long hunt was over. The vigil continued.